it was fun coming home on the bus, because everybody knew one another.
Right.
And you sit and talk about what your day was and how much fun you had and so forth. And whenever you got your annual, everybody signed it, and that was special for you. And I got to work in the office for 2 years, so that was special because I knew Papa Gould real well and Brownie,
Right.
and she was a fun person to be around. And she was like a kid. Even though she was the secretary there, she still would talk about how she was going to go buy her school clothes, and stuff like that. And she was a real fun person to be with, and I enjoyed that.
And same with you. What did you do in high school?
Listening to Thelma, it is odd that when I was in high school, I did exactly the same thing. Girls didn't go to college in those days, boys went to college more than girls did. So we kind of knew we weren't going to go to college because money for one thing, and having to go out of town is another. So we went toward the office work, and our aunts had done office work because I did exactly the same thing. I worked in the office, like during lunch hour, helping in the office, not after school because Grandma was strict with us, and she knew what time the bus came. So we could see her standing in the middle of the street watching for the bus. When we got off the bus, you didn't go anywhere else. You walked straight home. And she could see because from her house on J Street down by the creek, you could see Joe's Corner, even though it's 2 or 3 blocks up. And we could see her standing there like this, waiting for us. So we didn't get to do a lot of things after school like children do. We weren't in sports, after school sports. But I also went for the office thing because it was enjoyable, and the difference with Thelma and I, because of our age difference, when I left Niles school, I went 6th grade there, but they built Vallejo Mills, so I had to go 7th and 8th at Vallejo Mills, and we could take the bus there or we could walk, which was quite a walk. But we liked to walk because it was fun, and Big Daddy's hamburger place was on the corner over on the highway. And we'd go past Elderberry Park where the swimming pool was. So I went to Vallejo Mills, and then I went to Washington. Thelma graduated from Washington the year I went in. So she was gone, and I was a freshman, which was good because then I didn't have to say, oh, my sister was Thelma, when she was a senior. And then when they built Logan High in Union City, our junior year was our last year at Washington because the Niles kids had to go to James Logan with Dakota and Alvarado.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes. So our class was the first graduating class from Logan. In 1960 I graduated.
Oh.
So it was only 1 year I went to Logan. And there again, I worked in the office, and I was finance commissioner for the student body, so I worked in the student store. And then I also had to go to football games because I had to do the cash, so Grandma couldn't tell me I couldn't go. So I got to go to some football games. That's a highlight. You went to football games?
Yeah.
That was real fun, wasn't it?
But the only way I got to go to a football game is if my Uncle Ken would go. Then he'd come pick me up, and Aunt Ida would stay at Grandma's house, and then I would go to the game with him, and he would bring me back home.
And did you ever go with Uncle Joe and Aunt Lucy?
No.
See, I used to go with them. See if our aunts took us, or if she knew our friend's grandmother, our parents, then it was okay, because she knew who we were with. But if she didn't know who we were with, we didn't go.
You didn't go.
No, Grandma was...
She loved my friend Katie Jansen. Well, she was break then. and Katie would come and pick me up with her dad's car, and we'd go cruising in Hayward.
Oh, that was fun.
That was
Of course,
fun.
my grandma didn't know that we went cruising.
How about the ballroom? What was the name of that
Lish?
ballroom? The ballroom. It was.
Oh, the place where you went down
the Garden of Allah.
Garden. I never
we
went.
didn't go there.
No, I never went there when it was a skating ring either.
No.
Did you ever hear about it?
Yeah.
Did you know
Yeah, we
anything
heard
the
about
story?
We have a story about that. Grandma would go with Aunt Ida and Mom and Aunt Mary.
When they were young.
She would go with them to the Garden of Allah to the dances and sit and watch them.
So they didn't do anything that she didn't want them doing. So she was
right.
pretty strict all the
She
time.
was.
huh?
Mm-hmm.
And being that she got married so young and had a large family, she didn't want her girls
didn't
to
want
get
us to.
married. There's a lot of, if you had a boyfriend, she didn't talk to you.
Grandma was good at not talking to
Yeah,
us
she
when
was.
When she was mad at you.
Yeah.
She would pout.
Mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when did your grandmother pass away? Did she?
1969.
Yeah.
I was in Tennessee
Mm-hmm.
when
Well-
she passed away.
Okay, so both of you were married by that time?
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So what happened? When did you get married? And
I got married in 1958, I think it was. My son was born in 59.
Right.
and where did you meet your husband?
Huh?
in Niles.
I lived in Niles.
And your husband? Where did you meet him?
I met in Niles.
Oh,
He was
really?
from Niles. He worked at the steel mill. Harvey Jones.
Harvey Jones.
She met him in the bank.
Yeah.
Where you
She
were working.
worked.
So you met your husband, and when you got married, you continued to live in Niles then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did you move? Where did you live after you were married?
And we lived on First Street. We lived in Mr. Whitaker's house because my husband had bought it before I married him, and we lived there.
What was the
then
address?
Mr. Whitaker was the one that started Washington Hospital.
Oh,
He was
wow.
Yeah.
Pharmacist. He had a drugstore in Niles.
In Niles Whitaker Pharmacy.
And what was the address of the house?
Oh, your
The-
address.
The
on
address
Niles.
of the home.
It was on
I don't
Niles
remember.
Boulevard, but I don't remember the number.
Is
Don't
it
ask
still
me.
there?
If you leave town and
It was north.
you know where the
Before you-
Sullivan Underpass is, you'd go past that, and there was the food locker was right there, Niles Food Locker.
On the right?
And then those, yes, and then
Those
those
homes.
homes
There were
that
little
all looked
homes.
alike.
Yeah.
That's where she lived, about
Yeah.
mid.
Is it still there, or is it?
Yeah, it's still
Oh,
there.
well, we'll just have to look it up.
And get
find
the
out where it
number,
was.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can get the number. Yeah,
So you lived there a long time, or?
about a couple of years.
And then they,
We moved to Irvington,
yeah,
but
they bought a brand new house.
we didn't
in
like
Irvington.
being out of Niles, so then we moved back to up on Mission Boulevard in the Ellsworth tract, which
Yeah,
was
Ellsworth Tract.
um,
Goodrich.
Goodrich. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So you lived in those homes. Those are nice homes too.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was a half an acre. It was a big
Oh,
home.
it was a beautiful.
That's how you know
garden.
Suzanne Turner then, because they lived in that area
Oh,
also.
the Turners were in school with them.
Yeah,
You went to
I lived on the same street as Suzanne Turner.
That was
I
Hewitt's.
remember the day she got married.
So you lived on Goodrich.
Mhm.
Oh yes.
She
okay,
lived
I
like
remember.
4 houses down from me.
But you knew her from school too.
You knew her
Yeah,
from
I knew
school.
her from
Yeah, we
school.
knew her
I knew her family.
All the way
yeah.
through school, yeah.
So your son was born when you were living in Niles too, and what's his name?
My son was born when I lived on Main Street.
And his name?
Clayton.
Clayton
Jones.
and Jones. Okay, Clayton Jones. Okay, got that. Anything else? What about those years as a mother in Niles? What was different?
Well, I
You always worked.
yeah,
We
I
always
went to work.
We were
I
workers.
stayed home until Clayton was 5, and then when he went to kindergarten, he would go in the morning. So I went to work in the afternoon, and then his father got off from the steel mill at 2, so he'd pick him up from school. So it worked out fine, you know. So I would work part-time,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that at the bank, in the banking industry for about 12 years, and then I realized there wasn't money in banking, so I went to the corporate world. I started working at Peterbilt Motors in Newark, and I worked there for 16 years. I think it was 1972 when they closed, yeah.
And you were still living in Niles at that time?
Yeah, I was living at that time in Hacienda Gardens in Niles.
Oh, okay. And so your
At
son,
that time, my sister was in Tennessee, and she came out to California, and I told her how much money I made in California, and she made her kind of upset what she made in Tennessee, so she moved back to California.
We lived in Tennessee though for 9 years
so you got married, where did you meet your husband?
in Niles.
Oh, how did you meet him?
Oh, that's a good story. And I met Bob Robert Fusell and his father. They lived in Centerville, and the reason he came to Niles was because his father owned the cab and ambulance service and the answering service, Fremont.
Oh,
And he drove cab and ambulance for his father. And he was very good looking, and he had a 57 Chevy convertible. And he would bring it to Niles because they washed the fire station used to be across from where Joe's Corner is. It was just the next block across from the grocery store, which was Beliba's grocery store, Garden Basket. And when they built a new fire station, the old fire station became the cab and ambulance station for Fremont Ambulance in Niles. So if they had a call over there, they would sit there and wait for the next call, you know, deciding if they needed to go back to Centerville or not. So there was a garage there, and they would wash all the cabs and all the ambulances there at the garage. And so Bob came over there a lot to watch, so I started talking to him, and
sort
he'd
of
come
walking
wash his
around
car.
town, you happened to see him?
And my grandmother would be waiting, why wasn't I home yet? Because
Oh, from high school, from school?
well, or from the grocery store,
Oh,
because we
okay.
always walked uptown to get groceries. And I always took a long time to come back, and I was always in trouble for that. That's when I started getting, in trouble. And so Bob and I ended up getting married, and that was in 1962, and had my first child in 62.
Child's name?
And my child's name, my oldest child is Derek. And Bob and I lived in Centerville. We lived in the very first Glenmore Garden apartment building that they built. That was where we lived. And then we lived over Klein's restaurant.
Yes.
Because his dad worked at Klein's bar. And his apartment, my father-in-law, Ray Fusell, his apartment was over the restaurant part.
Right, I remember.
And when my first son was born, we were living there with Bob's dad, Ray. And then we moved back to Glenmore Gardens to a bigger apartment. And then I had my second son, Jack, in 63. And then my daughter was born. We were still in Niles,
In
or
Niles
that
or
area.
In the
When
Glenmore
Jack was
apartments,
born,
you
we were
said.
actually living in Dakota. Yeah, we were living by my aunt in Dakota in an apartment because we didn't have a home of our own. And then we moved back to Niles and lived across from the jail. You know,
In a
on Second
house,
Street.
did you rent a house
Yeah,
there?
a house. We rented a house there across from the jail.
I know where the jail
Okay,
is.
Kaiser's house, Mr. Kaiser's house. And
What address was that?
Oh, I don't know the address
remember the address.
exactly. I don't remember the address.
Okay.
And I liked that house because I was close to my sister. They lived in Hacienda Gardens. And my grandma lived about 3 blocks from me.
J Street, yeah.
Yeah, on J Street. So when Bob went to work at night, and my daughter was born while I lived in Niles, her name is Tracy. They were all born at Washington Hospital, it was Washington Township Hospital in the
Right.
beginning.
Mhm.
And Clayton was born there, and all 3 of my children were born there. And I would walk to Grandma's house after Bob went to work on second shift and eat dinner with Grandma, and
Now, second shift, that was,
like 3 to 11 or 3 to 12.
that was like did he work for cabs? He was doing the cabs still? Or
When
was he
his
doing-
father, he worked for his dad until his father passed away. And
When was
then-
that
That
about?
was in 1965,
Mhm.
the year my daughter was born. And then he went out working other places because the business was sold to somebody. And so we didn't have.
So what was second shift? What was he
Like
working?
3 to 11, and I don't remember, he had several jobs.
Yeah.
But I don't remember where he worked. He worked for the tile place for a while. And then we ended up moving to San Jose and lived in San Jose for a while. And then we moved back to Niles again. And then from Niles we went to Tennessee, and that was in 1967. And we stayed there until about 1976. Then we came back to Mission San Jose and ended up back in San Jose. And we stayed in San Jose for quite a few years. And then we divorced in 1980, so from that time I kind of wandered around again. I'm a gypsy. I went to Wyoming for a while, and I came back to California. And I guess I've been in California, I've been in California ever since then, yeah.
Wow, always sort of popping back to Niles and coming back.
She did more
and-
when she was younger,
Yeah.
and I kind of, yeah.
So is there anything that you would like to say more about, I mean, we're sort of emphasizing Niles. You guys had
Niles is
quite
our
a,
life, yeah. We love Niles, even though I
Yeah.
don't live
I
there.
don't live there now, but
We love it.
as you know, I'm doing all this for Niles.
For Niles.
exactly. And Big Daddy's, do you remember when it
Oh,
opened?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When did it open?
It was open in the 50s, wasn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Because when you lived on Goodrich and Bob would pick me up, we'd go
Yeah.
to Big Daddy's. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
stayed there a lot because
Mhm.
Clayton was, and still is, my only nephew.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Clayton was born,
He was really spoiled.
he was, and I was 16.
Yes.
It was, I'll never forget the day he was born because that was like, how great. And I got to babysit with him, and I had a new life because I
Right.
went to the Thelmas and Harveys a lot.
Mhm.
I stayed there a lot and went and took care of Clayton. And,
Right.
yeah, I was living with them when I went and eloped with Bob.
Mhm.
Yeah, we eloped and went to Reno.
Oh, wow. Exciting.
And she got to tell Grandma.
So what else? Is there something that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about, growing up in Niles? What, some of the good things or some of the things that weren't so good?
I
Do
think
you
it
remember
was
the
good
flood?
because
Basically, it was good.
it was good.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we were all in the same category. Nobody had a lot of money.
Right.
Some a little bit more than the others, but so one thing I like to say is that you never went to town when the steel mill got paid. They got paid every 2 weeks, and you stayed away from Niles as much as you could because all the guys would be in the bars drinking. It was a drinking town.
There were a lot of bars in Niles
Yeah,
Right.
in the 60s and
Right.
yeah,
50s.
50, oh yeah,
Yeah.
from the time we can remember. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but Joe's Corner used to be, we could get ice cream there
for a nickel.
for a nickel,
Oh.
ice cream cone for a nickel.
Oh, how fun.
And if you were of the Martin family, and there were guys sitting in the bar, and they said, "Oh, there's the Martin girls." They paid for our ice cream
Yeah.
all the time.
Oh,
They
that
would
was
never, we
nice.
never had to pay for ice
And the
cream.
movies, you would go to the movies on
Yeah.
Sundays. Didn't tell
The
you
movie
that.
theater.
Oh,
I forgot
And
yeah.
about
that
the
was
movie
fun.
theater.
It
Yeah.
was 20 cents to get into the matinee, and you get a nickel to spend for candy, so you get doobie beads or something that lasted a long
Oh, how
time.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on Wednesdays, you would go, they had a special night where you got dishes.
Mm-hmm.
So Grandma would go and everybody would go so you could get a dish.
A dish,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
got your dish sets.
And now
Oh,
they're
yeah.
collectible
Do you,
items.
do you have any
Yeah.
of those?
No, they all went to my Aunt Adelaide, and I don't know if Bev has them or not, I don't know.
Probably not. She doesn't
Yeah.
save stuff like
Yeah.
that, but.
So,
And
But-
Uncle Eddie had a lot of stuff of Grandma's that he sold
yeah.
after Grandma passed away.
Mhm.
He was a flea market person too. I'm a flea market person.
Mm-hmm.
I had a flea market business for years at San Jose Flea Market.
Oh, you did?
And I
Oh,
still
wow.
do flea market today.
Ah,
I
There
love
you
the flea
go.
market, yeah.
anything else? Oh, what about the flood,
Oh,
1955?
I was working at my Uncle Ken's Calvin Chicken Ranch, and he came and brought me home. And when he brought me home, he begged my grandmother to leave because the creek was just roaring. You could just hear it. It was.
This was just before or just after Christmas, wasn't it?
It was right before Christmas.
Just before Christmas.
He begged Grandma to leave because he was afraid the creek was going to bust. And he couldn't get home. She wouldn't go. And he couldn't get home because it broke toward the California nursery and all the water
went
was-
there.
was,
Mhm.
broke down on School Street. So all the water went
At that
went
end.
on that area.
So it didn't flood your
No.
grandmother's house?
No,
No,
Oh,
because we
wonderful.
lived at this end.
we live
Yeah,
at
we
that
lived
end.
at the town end, and it broke down by the nursery end. It got
Christmas
his-
presents were coming down the road and the Christmas trees and, and
It got Aunt Ida and Uncle Ken's
yeah,
house.
it did their house.
And
They
they had
had
a
to
new
go to
one.
Union City and stay that night.
Yeah,
You never know where it's gonna break,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
it's a lot different now than it used to be, because it wasn't controlled before. Now
Right.
it's controlled. And
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's why we have Niles Lake
They,
now.
it used to flood all over.
Mhm.
Alvarado would get flood and
Yeah.
you remember in Centerville, it was a big thing to ride around and see
Right.
what was
Where the
flooded.
flood- yeah.
So do you remember when they put in the flood control?
Yeah,
Was that in the 60s?
yeah,
Must have been.
Must have been,
Yeah.
'cause when we were gone, I think.
yeah, it was in middle 60s, wasn't it? Yeah. It
I
seems like
don't
it was,
really
yeah.
remember
We'll
what.
have to look that up in the
Yeah, we'll have to
history.
look that up. We'll have to do that. Well, okay, do you have anything else to
No.
mention or so?
Just that we love Niles.
Yes,
I could sure
Niles is
tell
a great
that.
place, still
And
is.
if you know Thelma and you know Helen, we are always having, someone is always planning something for the Niles kids to get together.
To get together. Because you grew up together and you lived together practically.
Right.
because
In the
of where you
same
lived.
room, yeah. We slept in a double bed in the beginning till my uncle bought us twin beds.
How great.
Yeah,
Well, thank you very much for all your time. It was great talking to you.
welcome.
Thank you.